Welcome to the Holistic Pathway Podcast, unscripted conversations on mind, body, spirit, and entrepreneurship. A brand new video series podcast where we dive deep into the holistic integration of life and business. I am Tammy Coyne, your holistic alchemist, helping you change pain into possibilities and possibilities into purpose. Today's chat is with Cindy Brockway. Cindy is a courage coach, helping educators, coaches, and entrepreneurs break out of a lifestyle driven by duty, guilt, and perfectionism by replacing old patterns of behavior with a structured and efficient resilience routine so they can face life's uncertainties with courage, clarity, and calm. I hope you're as excited as I am about today's conversation. Stay tuned and we'll see you soon. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to meet you. I don't think we've ever met before, and I love the opportunity to meet new people and see what kind of light they are shining out in the world. From what I read, it sounds like although we may use a little bit different words, it sounds like we do some similar things. So tell me, how has your path gone? How did you come into what you're doing now?
Well, it's an interesting story, and it is nice to be able to meet with you and talk and kind of think about where it all began.
Yeah.
So I'm an educator, and I taught special education for over 30 years.
Oh,
The
wow.
last few years was as an administrator, so that part wasn't as fun. But I have always been about empowering people,
Love it.
especially the students, oftentimes their parents,
Hmm.
and definitely empowering educators to be able to be inclusive and accept diverse populations.
Yeah.
And that translates really well into what I do now. Um, Over the years, though, my education degree and my working with special needs, it got to the point where I was giving so much to them and nothing to myself.
Yeah.
So my inner strength was dwindling. So in even before COVID, we started slowing down. I started working less hours intentionally. When you're in that type of a career, and there's many of those out there, like nurses and doctors, and so many careers where you never can do enough,
Yeah.
and you're working a lot, and in the beginning you want to,
Of
you
course.
really feel driven and you love what you're doing and how you're able to help people with certain things. And but in time, if you do not feed yourself, you're going to wither. And that's kind of what I did. And so I started on my working on myself, like a lot of people do, and taking some really constructive things, like
Hmm.
less hours at work, not bringing as much work home, explaining that, yeah, this is not in my job description when they wanted to make me expand what I was doing. And that's kind of where it started. And as an educator, I just really have this deep drive to help people recognize their own strengths,
Yeah.
regardless of their age, regardless of their responsibilities, regardless of their own abilities. You
Yeah.
know, you have strength, and people often forget it, or they've never really tapped into it and they are floundering.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Have you
Yes.
found that?
Oh my gosh, so much. Yes. And this is another reason why this podcast and everything kind of came about, because I know there are so many people out there shining their light in this world. And often what happens is, because we're spending so much of our life being that lighthouse, is that we often
Hmm.
feel like we're alone and feel like we're in the dark because we're the one shining the light, right? And so part of what my idea was for this was that finding more of us who are throughout the country, across the world, so that not only do we shine a bigger light to the world, but we also shine a bigger light to each other, so that we know that we're not in this alone. Because for those of us with hearts to help, hearts to support, hearts to do these kinds of things, burnout can happen, overwhelm can happen, so many different things can happen. And you said something, there was something in particular. Did I lose it? Let me think. It was right there. It was just right there. It'll come back. It'll come back. But it's that thing to where, oh, I know what it was. So in the holistic healing arts, one of the things that we are taught is when you give a session, get a session. Now,
Mm,
I don't think out in the mainstream world they teach that. That's why there are so many
no.
people out there who get burned out. Now, to be clear, a lot of people in the holistic field, they forget and they don't do it either. And what happens is you've got people who are giving, and which comes from a masculine energy place.
Mm-hmm,
Has nothing
mm-hmm.
to do with gender, but it's masculine energy, always giving,
Yeah.
giving, giving, giving. And it's being able to learn to receive, and learning to receive. And often for all of us, but especially women, have a really hard time receiving help, receiving support, accepting even so much as a compliment, because we are so used to pouring out, and where we end up just running around with this empty cup, that we're still somehow, I used to say I felt like a dually truck, which has like two gas tanks. And I had one tank that always seemed full for everyone else, but my particular tank was empty.
Yeah.
And so I think what you've said is so critical, because I think people get the idea that when you're someone who loves others and who dedicates their life to support and to help, that somehow if you burn out or you get tired, somehow that indicates you don't care anymore. And actually, that's absolutely not the case at all. Setting those boundaries for ourselves, understanding to stop doing things out of obligation, and actually
Yes.
filling yourself up, so you actually have more to give. And I think that's so critical. Now, are you still working in the education system at all, or have you gone completely into working
Yeah.
with coaches and
I,
things like that?
right. I am completely online.
Okay.
And but I still work with educators. I am part of a co-created community, and we do professional development of different kinds for educators. My focus, of course, is on mindset and on inner strength. And but then I reach out to a lot of other people in different fields through that. I think what you were just talking about is that we do not necessarily know how to lead with our drive without feeding ourselves. And like you said, give a session, take a session.
Mhm.
I like that idea, and it just reminds me that for many years I did not do that.
Yeah,
Because we wear so many hats,
so many.
and you feel like, you know, I'm not a perfectionist. I am someone who seems to like to make things perfect. So I have to be careful. And I've learned how to be careful, because if you are in that space of doubt and fear or worry over what you're doing or how people are perceiving you, you are not, you are going to burn out quicker.
Yeah.
You're going to lose your focus. And I just found that over the years, as you know, the responsibilities piled on, and when you get really good in your field, especially in special education, they beat you down,
Mhm.
with all of the responsibilities. They give you the worst kids. They give you the worst, families to deal with, and it makes it hard
Mhm.
because you're really good at what you do, and it's almost you feel like they're punishing you. And
Yeah.
I hated that feeling, sort of late career. When I started feeling that way, I knew that I had to do something different. And so I wanted to get my resilience back. And
Yeah.
so I started with those just some practical resilience exercises, techniques that I've used to just help build my inner strength up again and to learn to lead with well being,
Mhm.
not with my drive. You
Yeah.
know, our drive is a super powerful energy, but we can't lead with that drive
Well,
or
the
we'll get
drive,
burnout.
absolutely. The drive also usually comes from a place of ego, which is a different conversation. But when we recognize that leading from a place of service rather than a place of ego, which is a lot of times where the drive is. I have a drive also. We all do, I think, who are driven to make a difference. But when you can
Hmm.
shift that energy, that's what's important. The perfectionist part, I like to refer to myself as a former perfectionist. And I had a friend that who's also been a client said, "Oh, you're still a perfectionist," and I said, "No, actually, I'm not." And here's the difference: when I worked as a federal analyst, and when I spent 20 years in the federal government, which there are a lot of similarities in what you said. A lot of times you have certain people in the government who go above and beyond all the time. And so they get more and more of the stuff, which does start to feel like punishment. So I
Yeah.
recognize that. But what I was going to say is what I learned was my perfectionist tendencies were very connected to trauma. And for me, they were connected to the fact of feeling like I was never quite good enough, never quite enough. And so I was always trying to make things perfect. So then I got into doing deep holistic healing work and started to try to loosen my grip on things, let go of control, all of these kinds of things. And I put myself in what I call loosey goosey, right? To where I just tried to roll with whatever. Well,
Yeah.
I found that that didn't really work. So I'm like,
No.
okay, so here are two different sides of the pendulum. Where am I? And what I found was that I'm somebody with really high standards. So what does that mean? What is the difference for me? What the difference is as a perfectionist, I was constantly full of anxiety on the inside. I wasn't doing enough. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't there. It was more, 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 more. But having high standards means I'm okay with what is. That's part of why this podcast is unscripted. It's part of why the only edit I do is I put the intro with the actual podcast. I don't edit out if I sneeze or I stumble or whatever. And so it's knowing that it's important to me that it's high standard without it tearing me up on the inside. There's a
Hmm.
difference in that. Have you
Yeah.
found that to be true?
Yes, yes, very similar. You know, I am a high achiever, and that's usually most of the people that I work with
Mhm.
that are high achievers now and are floundering, or were high achievers and had some massive burnout.
Yeah.
And then I also work with some people who are high achievers and they just want to take the edge off of the achievement part and kind of re examine the holistic part of it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, Tammy, are you a firstborn?
I am. Can you
See? Yeah,
tell?
yeah. Me too. And I sort of think that that has a lot to do with it. You know, when you are a firstborn, and I've heard this from a lot of different people, your parents have high expectations for you.
Hmm.
And they expect you to be the leader and they expect you to be an example and they expect you to be all this. And it kind of gets ingrained in there. And then for me, and I don't know if this is something you experienced, for me, my faith and the the act of going to services, to church, and being under certain types of preaching really burdened me with guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that's every single church, and I'm not saying that my church was even at fault necessarily.
Yeah.
But in my little high achieving, professionistic brain, I interpreted it as a lot of guilt, that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't meeting up to the standards, and that God expects more out of you, and He expects, perfection,
Yeah.
you know and you can't be that. You can't do that. And it's interesting for me. I have a devotional app that I use, and with my mom every morning. She lives with me, and so every day during the week we sit together and we have like devotions or a meditation time. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, the scriptures and things that they use and the little talk that they use ends up with one guilt trip at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Today we had one that was on, I can't remember now the topic off the top of my head, but it was on joy. And this was the first one in a long time that I didn't feel them sticking in the needle on that guilt,
Yeah.
you know. And so that's what I've learned to steer away from. I have not lost my faith, but I've
Mm-hmm.
learned to steer away from scenarios where they that you're never enough.
That is so beautiful. There are so many people. I moved away from religion years ago, and that's a bigger conversation for another time, and embraced spirituality. And a lot of that time,
Hmm.
people thought that that meant I had a problem with God or spirit, universe, great spirit, higher self, whatever terminology. Said, no, that's not it. There was something about the the gossip and the looking down on and the guilt and the shaming and some of these other things, not to mention the fact that there was some sexual abuse that I experienced as well. So
Mm.
it's for me, and I've had clients who have left churches, who have left the Mormon church, who have left a variety of things, and they're seeking, they still have faith. But they're seeking something. It's not the same as what many of us were taught. And so, what I have come to believe on my journey, and this is part of what I share with people, is that my belief has evolved to knowing that I am a divine being. I am a product of spirit, of source, of God. So, how can I possibly be anything less than a divine being? And
Mm.
so for people who I work with, and that's important for them to know as well, is what their own value is, what their own worth is. And if you recognize yourself as a divine being, use the idea of the ocean and a wave of the ocean, or a drop of water of the ocean. You're still part of the ocean. So how could you be anything less than?
Hmm. Yes.
And
And that's true, but I know that, at least in my generation, when I was a teenager, and even when I was younger in the church, they now that I think back on it, it was like following the leader.
yeah.
I did and said what they did and said, what
Hmm.
they told us to do and say. And I found that, especially when I work with people on their emotional uh, needs, we work on finding a deeper purpose, not on walking away from the church, not on shaming you, but
Exactly.
finding a deeper purpose, healing from all of the way you perceive those things. Now, the sexual abuse is different, definitely
Yeah.
different, because that it was actually perpetrated upon someone.
Hmm.
But, these global things that we've gone through, if we were in religion, learning how to explore your passions and your purpose and your connection with God,
Divine.
with
Yeah.
the divine or the higher,
Yeah.
and that is when we start to live authentically. that's when a lot of the guilt and the shame and the doubt and the fear start to peel off. I
So
mean,
true.
it's a really transforming, when
It
you can learn to live authentically.
100%. My actual signature program is called Unboxing Your Authentic Self. And
Hmm.
it is because it is not about following me. It's not about doing things the way I think they ought to be done, or the way your job thinks they ought to be done, or your family, or your church, or whoever. What is going on inside of you, and where are you not living authentically? And I had a conversation with someone one day, and she said, I heard one of your videos, and I didn't even realize I wasn't living authentically, because this has been part of my
Hmm.
sort of constructed identity for so long. And I said, I get that. That's exactly why I came up with this, because it was mine too. And you start having, like, you're involved in this, and it creates this identity for you, and you're part of this, and that creates how, something else, and then something else. And somewhere along the way, you might find yourself feeling a lot of anxiety, or feeling a lot of depression, or feeling a lot of overwhelm or burnout or whatever, or guilt,
Hmm.
because you think, oh, well, gosh, I'm feeling some kind of way. And if I share it with someone, then, oh, doesn't go over well. People think I'm crazy, or people think I'm whatever it is. And they have all of this nervousness about even speaking their own truth.
Hmm.
And so it's important to, at least in the work that I do with people, it's so much about helping them explore that and figuring out what is their truth, what is true for you, and then how do you feel confident in showing up in that truth,
Yeah.
whatever the truth is. And I like to use the phrase, being empowered without disempowering anyone else. Like, you can be empowered within yourself and living your truth without feeling like you need to get other people on board with what
Yeah.
your truth is. That's
Right.
not important, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And it's like you want to justify. You
Hmm.
feel a need to justify why you're doing this or doing that, because
Yeah.
you feel or think that they are looking at you and giving you the stink eye and stuff like that. Yeah, this reminds me of a talk that I do on how to protect your self-image. And we talk about the difference when you're living authentically
Yeah.
between self-image, which is an idea, it's kind of something you've learned and it's a product of what you've learned,
Hmm.
or self acceptance, which is an action.
Yeah.
It's being able to take responsibility for your own happiness and accepting all the facets of yourself, positive, negative, neutral, you
Yeah.
know. And I feel like what we've been talking about is just, it is complex. Life is complex and it's overwhelming. And when you think about trying to do something different, it's often brings on that anxiety,
Hmm.
that stress, and almost, some people like, I'm not even going there, you know,
Yeah.
because you have to sometimes let go of things that you held so tightly and you didn't even know why. And
Absolutely.
that's why I call it, like you're following the leader, or sometimes you're treading water.
Yeah.
You've made a few changes in your life, but it got scary. It was hard, and now you're just treading water and you're not getting on to the next part yet. And what I like to do with my clients and in my Facebook community is I want to help them feel more at ease
Hmm.
in addressing life's complexities.
Yeah.
Like compassionate self-care. What does that look like in real life?
Hmm.
Navigating challenges and learning how to get to your neutral space.
Yeah.
So many times people say, just think positive and it'll all get better. That is not the answer
It
in
is
my
not.
experience. You know, you have to learn to be able to think neutral. You have to be more of an observer rather than a doer or a
Mhm.
responder or reactor.
Yeah.
And it's just learning how to enhance that compassion that has got trampled on and tap into your potential, your inner strength, your faith in a way that really feels authentic to you. And
So much so. There's so
yeah,
many different things I teach, and it often depends on who I'm working with as to what I teach, because I was called into service in 2014, and there are gifts that I was given when that happened, and I don't know what I know that's going to help a particular person. So when I do a lot of YouTube videos, even on the YouTube videos, especially when I'm doing those by myself, I just try to come up with things that I think someone might need. But sometimes it's hearing just the word a little bit differently or coming at it from a different way. And so many people may be saying the same things, but one is going to resonate and one is not going to resonate. And that's why I love the idea of the podcast, so that we've got people often speaking the same language, but they're coming from maybe using different words. Maybe they share a story that's a little bit different. For my people, one of the things that I've shared is I talk about one, have them go up on the mountain and look down on their life and being a witness, being an observer of what's transpiring and taking themselves out of it, being able to look at it almost like they're watching a movie and saying, what can I learn about how I'm showing up in this particular way? Is that the way that I want to show up? How does that feel in my body? Let me test that out. Another way is we talk about, sometimes I'll use this example, is when you're children, sometimes you play this game, King of the Mountain, right? And so you're trying to get up the mountain and people are trying to pull you off the top of the mountain. And when you have learned to be authentic, you can be on top of the mountain and no one can pull you off of the mountain because you are authentically being you. You don't mind if other people are at the top of the mountain too, but nobody can pull you back down because you are in your authenticity. You are strong in your boundaries and you are not doing anything to harm anyone else, to get anyone to see things your way. You're just standing in your truth. And you get to a point where you don't even have to really declare it because people feel it from you. They see
mm-hmm,
it from you. They
mm-hmm.
experience it from you just by walking in a room or by connecting with you in some way. They can start to feel that. And I think that's such a powerful thing for people to realize their own value, their own power that they've somehow lost along the way.
Yeah. And I really think it's just about expanding how you look at things. And my signature program is called Self Expansion Unlocked. And so that is talking about how to expand how you look at things from a friendship or, you know, a relationship type, your own mental thoughts, your
Yeah.
body thoughts, and then those circumstances or happenings that you are involved in, and how to really expand your thinking. You know, people are afraid to get out of their comfort zone, but I'm not expecting people to get out of their comfort zone. I expect them just to gradually expand. And, you know, if you're in a place, and this is a lot of times where my clients are starting at, they have a lot of subjectivity. They're not objective on things. They
Yeah.
already have a cut and dried way that they have told themselves that things are happening or that their role is in whatever situation. So their thinking is rather inflexible, even
Mm-hmm.
though they might be creative, they might be outgoing, but bam, it'll hit them right in the face when that inflexibility causes something to go off kilter.
Mhm.
And so it's just, that's, and you said something at the very beginning, and I was going to bring something up and I forgot about it, about people being able to, well, now I'm like you, I just lost that thought. So, and I can't guarantee it'll come back for me, but you said something, and now I can't think about what it was, about us being able to do something. Um, but anyway, I lost it. And it's too bad. And isn't it strange how that happens to us sometimes?
It's okay. I believe it's divine timing, as with all things, and that it'll come back when it needs to come back. And, there will be a recording, if nothing else, you'll hear it there, and it may spark your idea. And that's again, too, that recognition that sometimes we have been so used to looking at things through a certain lens, we don't even realize there's things on the other side. There's different
Hmm.
perspectives. I use sometimes exactly, and I use an
Yeah.
analogy sometimes of, you've got say a building, and you've got three people looking at the building. Well, they're all looking at the same building, but they all have a different perspective. They all have a different vantage point, and they may be able to see something you can't see. That's what's so challenging, on when we are ready to make changes in our lives. Sometimes that's why it's important to have a coach, a teacher, a mentor, a counselor, whatever it is, someone that can help you, because that person can often see things or hear things that you're not seeing or hearing. When you have been used to these same programs you've been running for so long, liken it to a computer. When they started out, they ran on a disk operating system, which was DOS. Windows was not even a thing yet. Well, and it can only run whatever you're telling it to run, right? It's going to run the same thing over and over again. And so if your mind has been running these same tapes, these same programs, whatever, maybe it's time for an upgrade. And you don't know how to upgrade because this is what you know. You don't even know how to search for what you need because you don't have the words,
Hmm.
and
Now, do
it's
you?
so important.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about that. Do you think that when you get in that mode of just, feeding it and it's going over and over and over, and I call it the spiral of doom, really, because we are just, those thoughts are just dragging us down. And do you think it has anything to do with setting boundaries, not only between you and another person, but the boundaries you put on yourself?
I think it can. What I think happens sometimes is we don't even know we're doing it because it's a subconscious thing that's going on.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah, I agree
sometimes
with that.
And sometimes we don't even have the awareness that there is a problem.
Hmm.
So, what I think happens in those instances, some people live their whole life without ever getting that awareness. Like they can run their whole life and never become aware that something needs to change, even though everyone else can see it. They can't see it. But you've got some people, and was really important, I think, on my journey. There was so much trauma and abuse and loss in my life that I ran in survival mode always. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is how I ran my life. I didn't
I've seen
know.
that a lot in the classroom.
Yeah, and you don't know how to do anything else. Like your same thought patterns just run over and over and over again. And the only way that you start getting out of that, usually, and I just did a video about this an hour ago, a pivotal thing will happen in your life, and it's like bam, like you run into something and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, now I have to change because now I'm being forced into new
Yeah.
ways of thinking. I tell people, it can really be much kinder if you will get the idea that something needs to change before it becomes emergent, or before I used to say, you almost had to hit me over the head with a frying pan to get me to
Yeah.
pay attention. And it doesn't have to be like that. And that's, again, another reason for these conversations. You never know what may spark between us that someone else might hear and say, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I've been doing. I want to know more about that, you know?
Yes, I know. And, I think that oftentimes we are thought our thing are often, and you probably agree with this, those patterns that are running around in there are distortions.
Yeah.
But like you said, we don't see them as distortions because
No.
we've lived it for so long. So when I try to help people understand that you need to have some safe strategies in place
Hmm.
so that when things, and I'm a kind of a big believer in being proactive. I
Yeah.
know it's important for us to go back and deal with things that and try to figure out what's going on, but sometimes you can't even put your finger on it,
Yeah.
what it was that is making you think this way. um is to be able to have some strategies in place, these safe strategies, and the idea that all of the stuff that we put out there is
Hmm.
learned.
Hmm.
It may come from the subconscious at times, but I think that everything that we put out there is something that we've learned. And but we need to know that it's not permanent or
Well, and
fixed.
that's it. That's exactly it. And it is coming from the subconscious. The subconscious acts, in fact, your body acts like, the terminology I use is like a memory foam mattress. You may not remember, but your body, your sense of yourself
Hmm.
remembers everything that you've been through. And it often comes up in, it can come up in all sorts of ways. It can come up in behaviors. It can come up in uh, medical conditions. It can come up in relationships. It can come up, you start seeing evidence of this in different ways. And sometimes that is your clue
Mm.
that things need to change. If you are continuing to follow this particular path and you're continuing to have these same kinds of things going on, that's usually a clue that something needs to change. Now, you may not know how to change it, and that's okay. That's when you get a coach, a teacher, a mentor, a counselor, whatever, to
Hmm.
help you do that. Because sometimes we can't see out of our own thinking. It's the only thinking we know. It's where we, and I use the word programming because it is very much like a computer. We are programmed from everything. We're programmed from parents, from teachers, from grandparents, from other kids, from schools, from TV, from radio, from advertisement. It's like we're just absorbing, 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 and we have no idea sometimes how we came to believe these certain things. But we do, we have them. And so then it's a matter of, okay, I don't think this is in service of me anymore. So now let me get busy on how to change this. How do I begin to see things differently? How do I come up with new things? And it can be very scary for people. I like change. I think change is awesome because that's how I grow. Other people are terrified of change.
Yeah, and it can be really scary if you are forced to change from someone outside.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your own body makes you have to change because your body is you're on medical leave, which I was on medical leave for 3 months, dealing with depression and migraines because of the way I was doing things and living.
Yeah.
But if someone puts that, it forces you to change by a divorce or things like that. Sometimes people lose their children in settings, in the courts and stuff because of these divorces and things. So it really does, it hurts, it's hard.
Yeah.
And when we start to deal with those kind of things, it's not like you're going to forget about it, you're going to ignore it, you're going to have to not respect the trauma that you've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about trying to eliminate all of those feelings. It's really more about learning how to live with them, learning how to navigate those situations safely when the water gets murky.
Mm-hmm.
And when you mentioned about the memory foam mattress, It reminds me of our bodies as far as memory in our muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about if you have a strain and stress in your upper shoulders, whatever, if you go to to a chiropractor or like to a massage therapist, she's not going to be able to get rid of that pain in one session.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not going to be able to do it with a little sweetie's massage. Your body has memory and you have to get down and dirty with it to be able to get it to, you know, release all
Mm-hmm.
of that tension. And I think it's the same way emotionally. Sometimes you have to get down and dirty with yourself, which feels ugly, but it's so um, refreshing when you're able to let go of that stuff that's had a grip on you.
It is. And my work really believes that there is an emotional root, or spiritual, but primarily I focus on emotional roots being at the root of all physical
Mhm.
symptoms. And when I say symptoms, that could be anything. It could be some weird thing going on with your body. It can be an actual diagnosis. It can be an addiction. It can be a broken bone. It can be something your body is giving you clues as to what is there and needing your attention. And I
Mhm.
refer to that as unhealed emotions. And some people don't, it takes a while for them to understand what that means until we start going into the different emotions or feelings that often will crop up in a certain place. So, example, I was diagnosed with emphysema when I was 38 years old. I have renounced all illness, so I don't deal with any of that. But so I was diagnosed with emphysema at 38, told I wouldn't live to 50. I'm now 59. What I know now is that the lungs, the chest area, so imagine anything to do with lungs, anything to do with heart issues, anything to do with that, we store grief in this
Mhm.
area. We store
Mhm.
grief and we store sadness and we store the feeling of the right to be loved or the right to receive love or give love. We store all of that here. And so if we've had wounds around that area, it will show up here. You may have a diagnosis. I was used to be a heavy smoker. It may show up as smoking addiction. It may, so there's lots of connections where your body is such a your friend, and you don't even realize how much your body has got your back and is attempting to show you what's still calling out for you for healing.
Mhm.
And I spent 30 years in traditional counseling, and I used to think, my God, does it really have to take this long? Like, and that's part of the beauty about the work that I do with people. It's about helping you find the root, and the root isn't necessarily a trauma. The root is a feeling that you've got that's somehow keeping you from moving forward and helping you get to the other side of that. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's a powerful way that our body and our mind help us, that we're never really taught how to appropriately use those to our own advantage.
Yes, and now it comes back to me what you said earlier, and how and I don't remember what you said earlier, but you just said it again. You don't need to be in counseling for 30 years. If you are, it's not working,
Hmm.
you know? So the way I approach what I do, and I'm sure you're the same in this respect, is you teach them how to think for themselves.
Yes.
And that's what this self expansion unlocked is. You
Hmm.
get unlocked, and then you have the tools to take care of yourself.
$100%.
You don't have to schedule a therapy session every other week. You know, they are good in
Hmm.
when you need them. Absolutely. I have been into counseling
Yeah.
over the years, but I have never been in long term
Yeah.
because I feel like I get their perspective. They help me to get out of my head and to be able to kind of look at things. And therefore, you're able then to start making your own decisions. And if you learn how to address it and put some certain action steps in place to protect yourself, then you're going to be able to solve a lot of these issues on your own, you know, moving forward.
Well, as far as traditional counseling goes, I had severe trauma and severe abuse. And during much of that time, there would have been no way, to my understanding, that I would have been able to really go another route other than what I did, even though I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
about other routes at that point, because for one, I couldn't see anything other than trauma. That's all I could see. Other than trauma and abuse, that's all I could see. And so I needed to be able to do that. I wasn't really ready to move forward. There
Right.
was no way for me
You
to
needed
move
that
forward.
structure.
Yeah.
You needed that structure.
And so it's important for people, and and I went the medication route, and I'd done all these different things. And I often have said to people, there were many times on my journey I wouldn't have been ready for the work that I do now. And that's why it's always important that I do consultations with people, so I figure out, are we really a good fit right now for you?
Yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important for anybody. Anytime you go look for a coach, a healer, a teacher, a mentor, a counselor, whatever it is, it's so important that they can meet you where you are and that you're a good fit. Just because someone has a certain title does not mean they're the right fit for you. And it's really important, I think, for the two of you to get to choose each other,
Mm-hmm.
so that it is, you both know that if you're working one-on-one, that
Yeah.
this is a choice that we both make. And I've said to people many times, I am never going to show up and work harder than you do. However, I will show up at the level you show up. So however much you're putting in, I will match you. Let's do
Mm-hmm.
it that way.
Yeah.
And because it's really important that that person is invested in their own growth and their own healing,
Mm-hmm.
or it's never going to matter if they can't get on board with being committed to their own growth. there's it's you can't drag people, and I
Mm-hmm.
won't. I'm not in the convincing business at all.
No, no, it's not gonna work if
No.
they're not willing to do it themselves. And Tammy, I really do appreciate you bringing up the um the seriousness of trauma, deep
Yeah.
trauma,
Yeah.
because I feel like, the more you've been wounded, the more difficult it is for you to be able to, you've got all these scars,
Mhm.
and for you to be able to get through that scar tissue. And then I feel like I haven't had the experience with that type of trauma, but as you get older and you go through different stages, it hits you again in another way.
Mhm.
So it's not like you can go to a session in your 20s or even as a teen or in elementary school. Um, that type of counselor is going to work with you differently than when you're in college and all of a sudden your boyfriend does something that freaks you out and you've almost got like this post-traumatic stress. You need to be able to see someone that can help you at that stage. And then when you start having your own kids,
Yeah.
that trauma can revisit you. So I didn't
It.
mean to, say that counseling long term is a
Mhm.
bad thing, because there is a purpose.
There definitely is. And, I say a lot on my channel, I've gotten to the other side of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And what I
Yeah,
mean by that is that I can talk about pretty much anything that's ever transpired in my life without being triggered. I can
yeah.
live my life without being triggered, where in the past I was a walking trigger. You never knew
Mm,
when something was going to set me off. And I made mistakes over and over and over again that were because of this unresolved things. And I've also said to people, not every trauma is going to look like mine. And
no.
that's okay. However, you may have had something that may not look like trauma to anyone else, but at the age you experienced, it felt traumatic to you. Doesn't mean it looks like mine. It could be someone said something, very unkind to you getting on the bus one day, and someone else, or even your adult self, might go, oh, it's fine, it's nothing. But it's still something that has sort of just stayed with you your whole life. There may have been something that was not seemingly traumatic at all, but somehow that instance caused you to feel like you didn't have any power, or caused you to feel like you didn't have a voice, or caused you to feel like somehow you didn't matter. And it could be something that seems totally normal, run of the mill, not traumatic in that sense of the word. However, it impacted you in a way that continues to stay with you. That's the important part for people to realize, I think.
And I feel like guilt comes in there too, because when it
Oh, yeah.
happens and you feel like whatever you're going through, I feel guilty sometimes expressing it to people, or I did for a long time, because I didn't think it was as bad as what someone else has been through and what someone does.
100%.
So I stuffed it down because I just didn't think that it was as important as other people's trauma or other
Yeah.
people's issues. And I was
Yes.
wrong. I was wrong, but I didn't know that. I mean, I was in my 50s when I started realizing that, honey, you went through just as much trauma on it from a different, I don't know how you explain it. It was a different kind of trauma.
Yeah.
Trauma is not, just one specific thing like sexual
No.
abuse or something like that. It can be all different ways. And if
It
it's
it can. And there's no measuring stick on pain.
oh, now that can bring me to tears.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I never had anybody say that before. There is no measuring stick on pain. So don't do it.
There's not. The only
Yeah.
measuring stick that there is for how is it impacting you? How is it impacting you? And that is the measuring stick, not against what someone else
Yeah.
experienced. It's kind of like, well, I'm not as good as so and so because, or my trauma is not enough because, or I
Yeah.
didn't suffer enough because. No, let's look at you and what you have got going on, and let's figure that out, because what matters is how it's impacting you.
Hmm.
And I've shared this with people before, like for my own story in particular, it's not about the amount of trauma. The point of the stories that I share is to get you to understand that I get it. I get what it, and I get what it's like to carry this huge load and get to the other side. So what if I can take that same perspective and help you get to the other side? That's the thing.
Hmm.
Whatever it is you're needing to get to the other side of, whatever it is that's holding you back from being the highest and greatest expression of yourself.
Yeah. 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 And I think each of us go through different things and we conquer different things. And
Yeah.
those of us who are in the service industry to help others, um, we're not meant to support everybody.
Yeah. No,
So people that are drawn to you and your story, that's the ones that need that type of support that you offer.
absolutely.
People that can relate to what I'm doing and what I did and what I went through and what I still go through, then they may be drawn to what I have to offer to help them.
Yeah.
And when you think about some of the different clients, that you've had over the years, there's they're so different.
They're so different.
Yeah. And like you said a little bit ago, my trauma is not anybody else's trauma. There
No.
is no degree of trauma
Mm-mm.
necessarily. And we could have experienced the very same thing.
and
But
and then have different effects from it.
yeah, yep,
Yeah. For
yeah,
sure. For sure. That's so important. I mean, and in all truth, most of the people who come to me don't have histories like mine.
yeah,
Awesome. Thank God. Thank God
Yeah.
I don't have this. You know what I'm saying? And then,
Yes.
and there are times I've had people who have had, if we're looking at measuring sticks, have had it a lot worse than me, you know. And so the point is how is it impacting your life? Whatever you've got going on, how is it continuing to show up in your life day after day, year after year? And what is it you're wanting instead? And who is the best person to help you? And that's why I don't believe in competition at all. And I love the idea of coming together with people not only all across the country but all over the world, so that people get a different idea, a different perspective, and they may hear just the right word, or they may see just the right look in someone's eyes and say, that's the person I need. Which reminds me, I don't think I asked you, where are you at in the world? Where are you located?
In Murphy, North Carolina.
In North Carolina. All
Yeah.
right. I'm in Arizona. I'm from Oklahoma, but I'm in Arizona. And so I think it's exciting to find out, like, okay, we've got North Carolina represented here. We've got you, and
Yeah.
you're in North Carolina. Even though we work online, I think it's fun because people resonate sometimes with the way someone says something, or terminology that they use or something like that. It feels familiar to their ears, and sometimes that's helpful for someone
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So, gosh, what a great conversation. We're coming up on the end of our time together. Is there anything that you can think of that you would love for people to know, or anything that you would like to share before we
Yeah.
hang up?
Yeah, I think one of the things I want people to remember first of all from listening to our call is there's not a measuring stick on pain. And of course,
Yeah.
that's yours, not mine.
Okay.
But that was, I think, one of the most profound things for me on our chat here. So thank you, Tammy, for reaching deep, deep down into my soul.
Oh,
And then it's learning that repetition can be a bad thing when it comes to our thoughts, but when you're taking action and you're wanting to break that cycle, repetition is your best friend.
it is. That's
And
that's so
yeah,
true. And
there you go.
sometimes and I think about this too, if you're doing things over and over, and I use sometimes stuck in the mud and your wheels are just
Yeah.
spinning, right? You've got to get up out of that rut to be able to get going. But if you don't know new tools, new repetitive tools, you go right back into the same rut.
Hmm.
So, well, thank you very much for watching. This is Tammy Coyne, your holistic alchemist, on the Holistic Pathway podcast, coming to you every week with unscripted conversations on mind, body, spirit, and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.